Okay, so I've just downloaded your scene, and I'm just going to go through and basically do everything I did in lesson before I messaged you. So first of all, our camera, for while we're working and stuff, before we set up a camera to actually, take these renders, our camera's set to a really weird field of view. It makes it really difficult to move around comfortably. I mean, I'm in the open world scene here, and we've got this massively long telephoto lens effect going on. So first of all, what I'm going to do is just come up here to the top left where they got 3 bars here, and you got your field of view setting here. So I'm just going to change that to 85. That's about your standard scene kind of camera focal length. And that's just set to the working camera. If you were to bring in a cine camera to be the thing that takes the pictures, then you can set that field of view to be whatever you want, and then that doesn't affect the way that you're working with a scene. Okay, so with that done, let's move to the character scene. Whichever one it was. Not that one. That one, there you go. So this is the scene that I got from you, that you were looking at in class. So one thing we discussed was the fact that it was very, very small, and you did have the old version of Mighty that was really small. But I put the new version up there, obviously. And I've actually got mine here. So what I'm going to do is just drag the new Manny in. Don't want to bring in any materials. Import that. Give it a second to import. There we go. So I'm going to drag him in. I'm going to set him to 0, 0, 0. There you go. So you can see, really, really small. So what I'm going to do is grab all your components. So is that actually anything? For some reason my Unreal isn't focusing. Don't know why. Okay, so I'm going to grab everything that looks like it's part of your character. And then just scale it up. There we go. Now it's focusing. Don't know why it's focusing for. So bring it up here. Scale her up. So she's about the size of Manny. Obviously he's 6 foot, so he's kind of like of size, so you can scale it appropriately however you want. So I'll leave him in the scene. I'll just move him off to the side just in case you want to come back and move. We want to come back and use him again for whatever reason. Okay. So we sorted out the camera, so it's a bit easier to work with for now. And then we just sorted out a scale. Cool. So what I'm going to do now is just get some of the lighting working a bit better before I start looking at anything else. And that's the easiest thing to do. So what we've got in the scene is a few very powerful components, and it's probably why she's looking dead washed out. Very, very white. It's because we've got a lot of white lights around us. We've got a directional light behind us, and then we've got 2 point lights. And that's bathing the scene in a lot of light. What is this behind us? Is this a rectangle light? What's that? And then we've got a rec light. So we've got 4 lights in very, very, very close proximity, especially now that we've scaled her up. So what I'm going to do is actually get rid of them all. Like that. And start from scratch. So if I hold L and just click on the ground, we're going to get a point light. And this is just a standard point light as well. So I'm not sure what settings you changed, if any, you changed for your point lights, but I'm just going to bring in a point light as a bit of a working light for now. Over on the right hand side here in your details, we're set to unitless, but I'm just going to set that to lumens. Just the reason I'm doing that is if we want to reference any particular light intensities, most of the time they're going to be in lumens these days anyway. And unitless, like all these, it basically gives you this, it doesn't change the way the light works, it just changes the way we calculate our intensities. So I'm just going to set that to lumens. Okay, and I'm going to set that to about 25. There we go. So already she's looking a little bit nicer. Softer shadows. The further away the light source is from an object as well, the softer the shadows are going to be. If it's really up close, you get very, very sharp shadows. What do we see? But these are things. I mean, that doesn't look particularly that bad. You know, that looks a bit moody. Looks quite good. So if I also just copy that to the other side, you'll see that, you know, if you have too many lights in the scene, you start getting a bit of a light bath. You do have that. You did have that message as well coming up here saying you had multiple lights overlapping each other. That just means you've got too many lights. This kind of blue circle around here, this blue sphere, the attenuation, too many of them overlapping. Cool. So move it over there. And like I said, this is just a working light for now. Next, what I'm going to do, and this is the thing which really gave my screenshot kind of its potency, I guess, its niceness, is I'm going to bring in a plane. So I'm going to bring in a plane like this. Just make it really big, and I'm going to do something interesting with this. I'm going to apply a material. I'm going to create a new material. So wherever you want to put your materials, wherever. I'm going to call this bounce. So M_bounce. Bounce. I'm missing an end there. Bounce. There we go. And then I'm going to apply this to the surface. Now what I'm going to do here is effectively create a bounce board, a flash box that you might see in photography studios. So if you see photography studios, they have some of them have like stands with this kind of like fabric square thing on it. If you don't know much about photography, you might already know this. And that is a flash box. So what happens is a bulb inside, and then there's a piece of very thin fabric which basically bursts the light and stops it from being a very direct light, very strong light, and diffuses the light, so all the shadows become very, very soft. Kind of acts like clouds. On a cloudy day, you don't get very sharp shadows. On a not cloudy day, you get very sharp shadows because there's nothing diffusing the light. And all I'm going to do is just open up that material and apply a color in here. I could do this with both a color and a constant. A constant being just a 0 to 1 number. So I'm going to hold 3. I'm going to do it on both of them actually. I'm just going to hold 3 and click, and that creates a constant or a color node. And if I hold 1 and click, I make a constant. So this is a constant 3, sorry. This is a constant 3, which is a color node. It's got red, green, blue. 1, 2, 3. And this is just black to white, so this is a 1. And basically what I'm going to do, I can control the light I'm going to emanate from this surface with this. So if I just drag this constant node and plug it into my emissive color, and I'm going to save that. If I go back to the scene, nothing's happening, you know. With that in there, it is giving a little bit of bounce to the side, so if I had to delete that quickly, you do lose a little bit of bounce on there. Because you see more inside the shadows, like around the cheeks and around this part of the arm. What we're doing is we're bouncing a little bit of light off the surface, and some of the photons are hitting the character on the offside and kind of lighting up inside them shadows. But what I'm going to do is use this as a light source, essentially. So when I start to increase, I'll just drag this off a second, like that. When I start to increase this value in here, that's plugged into the emissive channel. So if I put 1 in there, just go to max, and hit apply, you're going to see that this basically turns into a light source. This is effectively one of these diffuse boxes or a bounce board in a photography studio. And now if I actually find that light, I'm just going to take the light away. I only needed that light just to get this in so I can see what I'm doing. So now what you can see is the light source is very soft on the character. Very, very soft. It's almost realistic. It's very bright, but we can sort that out in a second. But as you can see, because we're using this kind of bounce board, this is a light source, what this produces is very, very, very soft shadows. And it's all proximity based as well, so I can move it very close and we get very intense. Well, I can move it far away and we get very subtle. So I'm going to move it back. And I'm also making it very, very big so that it gives me nice soft shadows. Basically, the smaller this is, the sharper the shadows, even though it doesn't really do as sharp as shadows as you'd get from an actual light source. So I'm going to kind of aim it towards the character a bit. There we go. So now we've got this. And we've even got a nice little bit of like reflection in the eyes, which is always nice. You know, gives a bit of believability, which is nice. Now something else is what's happening in this scene is the exposure. So as you've probably seen, as I move around, looking into the dark and then looking back at the surface, you'll see that the exposure adjusts. You know, when it's dark, it kind of brightens up. When it lights, it kind of comes down a little bit. Now what it's doing is it's auto-exposing the scene to basically give us a better look into stuff. It's very good when we're doing editing stuff, but when we're actually making lighting setups, or proper lighting setups, or we're dealing with like here, like little renders and stuff, not the greatest. It kind of hinders us. So what I'm going to do is use one of those post-processing volumes that we talked about last year. So if I just come up to the little plus icon box, the quick access menu here, I'm going to type in post in the search bar at the top, click volume, there we go. So what we brought in the scene now is a post-processing volume. So by default, anything within this box gets affected by what we're going to change, but I can actually have this affect the entire scene. So with it selected in the details box here, I'm just going to type inf for infinite, and then I'm basically going to filter out all the different things. So infinite extend unbound here basically just turns it, when it's unticked, I'm only affecting the scene when the camera itself is within this box. With this ticked, the entire scene is getting affected, but the box still stays there. So I'm going to have that ticked on. That's really good if you're making levels and you want to go from like, you know, a black and white scene to a coloured scene to something that's a bit crazy. You know, you can have these kind of setups, so you're going from these different kind of moods. But I'm going to put it in the scene, so I'm put this over there as well with money. Now why we bring that into the scene is because that gives us control over what's happening in the camera. So if I just clear that search bar now and make sure I select this, there we go. What I'm also going to do, just before I move on as well, is I'm going to find a decent position for the camera at first. Not necessarily for render, but just for while I'm checking stuff out. I'm going to hit Control 1. Again, we did this last year. Control 1. And you'll see bottom here it says Saved Bookmark 1. And I'll move the camera here. Control 2, save bookmark 2. 3, save bookmark 3. So what happens there is I'm saving camera positions. So as I press 1 there, I change to this. 3, 2. And I can actually see the auto exposure working a lot there. And because this kind of goes through the range of exposure as well, it kind of hits the point where I'm like, oh, that's actually the perfect position. Because you can see it kind of come through that range of exposure. You can see it kind of, if I go back to 1, around there might be what I want. But then it carries on, it exposes more, it gets very blurred out. So what we're going to do is just look at these. We'll look at the post-processing again for a sec. See what's in it. So it's full of tons of stuff, and you can have a play with it, and it's all basically affecting what the camera does. So if I just do like bloom, for instance, so I can turn on and off the things I want to happen. So if I go for method and intensity, I can change the intensity of bloom, and I can and then turn stuff off. My favorite chromatic aberration, so I can actually intensify that chromatic aberration. But what I'm going to do for you is show you the exposure, and these are really, really simple settings. So I'm just going to turn on the method just to make sure that it knows what method we're doing. I can even set it to manual if I wanted to, and then do a lot of changing, whatever you want to do. There you go. There you go. So it's starting to come back a little. That's just because I changed the exposure methods. My exposure compensation, the second one, is I can make it boost how much this goes. Now this isn't the only setting I'm going to use. There we go. Basically that's set to auto exposure histogram. Basic is just rubbish. So yeah, what exposure compensation does is it compensates, so I can actually throttle back the exposure. Now this might be alright for you to use kind of on its own a little bit. This is better used when you're doing things like scenes where you're going to walk around, because this basically allows you to pick your maximum exposure essentially. But I'm going to set this to 0, so I'm not compensating anything. And if I want to, I can flavour it a bit later on. And the other 4 settings I'm going to turn on are at the bottom. The min EV, the max EV, speed up and speed down. Again, these two at the bottom, speed up, speed down, are more for when you're dealing with environments, because it's the speed in which a camera changes from dark to light and how fast it ramps up and down. So I'm going to turn on those 4 at the bottom. So these two, speed up and speed down, I'm just going to put those as 3. And I believe that's just the second, yeah, it's the seconds it moves between them. So if I go and... So it's the speed in which it goes from its darkest to its lightest. Let me grab the... There we go. Now where the real power comes from is the min and max EV, and this is the range in which the exposure will travel. And weirdly enough, it's minus numbers that are going to be good for you on this one. So we just have a play, see what it does. So your min EV affects like that. Your max EV affects like that. So your max EV is basically how high it will expose. Your min EV is how low it will expose. So what I like doing is my min EV, I like going for -3, and for max EV, I like going for -1. Quite nice. And then you can flavour that again. I can come up to my compensation and maybe do a minus number of that if I wanted to. Maybe do a positive number, so I might go for 1. You know, it's all however you want to flavour it. The rest of it is either like advanced settings or even like parameters and kind of weird, what is it, like exposure compensation range. Oh, that's a curve, and that's a metering. Oh, it's things I don't ever use. But just by doing that, I've got essentially a flash box in the side there. That's giving me lots of nice shadows, lots of nice light, and lots of nice soft shadows. Now, if I want to come in here and spice it up a little bit more, I can come in and use lights. I could use a point light, absolutely. I could also use a spotlight. But probably in this kind of environment, what I wouldn't use is a directional light. Now, you have got a scene already set up at a level. I think it's this one, where you're in the open world environment. So that's got good lighting for if you're doing like outdoor lighting. But here, because you're in a black scene with no lights and no processing except what we put in there, this is more like a photography studio. So what I'm going to do is just I'll just try a point light. So I'm just going to hold L, click in the ground over here. I'm just going to shift it a bit closer because it's all the way in the wrong area. And again, I can just move this around, adjust the exposure, not the exposure, sorry, the intensity. So you can see that's really bright underneath, but if I set that down to like, I don't know, 250, 250. So just by adding a little bit there, I'm just, you know, putting a bit of information inside. And I can even change the colour. I'll never go for a really, really strong colour, but I can maybe put cool on one side, and then I can put a warm somewhere else. So I could do something like that, and then, you know, just play with some of those subtle settings. Because by default it's set to 5,000. Well, if we're in lumens, it's set to 100 lumens, so that's like, that washes us out. But if I again 10, 20, 5, 2, you know, it can be really, really nice and subtle. So let's put that to 10 for no, let's put the 5 for now. I quite like 5. So you can see if I turn it on and off, you can kind of see how that works. In fact, I'm going to take it. I'm going to really make it quite subtle. Nice. In fact, I'm just going to grab the exposure. I'm just going to put that down to 0 and 0. That's basically the lowest it can go, because that should now not change its exposure. It shouldn't, from side to side, it shouldn't shift the exposure at all. Cool. Now I'm going to put another point light in the scene, but behind her. And this is some of my favorite lighting. It's called rim lighting. So I'll move it. And this does need to be a little bit intense. So you can see there, I've got that little rim light behind her. Just picking up some of the details behind her. And I could make that quite intense if I wanted to. I could also give that quite a drastic colour. Like that. And then maybe I can even duplicate it. So I'm going to grab it, lift one up. So I'm going to bathe the top of her head in light, essentially. And I can just move that around, essentially, so... Give me control. There we go. So maybe it's on that side, you know, highlight a little bit of that hair on that side. Seems we might have a cold light from one side and then a warm light from the other. Don't want to bathe it too much. There we go. So, you know, just really, really simple things we can do just with nice effective lighting. Like, lighting is so important for this kind of stuff. And yeah, then you can just have your different camera setups. Now, some of you might want to turn off lights. You might want to have different lighting setups for different ones, whatever. So for here, you might like that one, but for this one, you might turn off 2 lights and then turn on another 2 lights that you already have in, but they're currently hidden. It's nice. Now, we did talk about the face becoming like washed out when you brought the hair onto it. I think that's down to the exposure. I think because you brought a darker element onto the screen, the amount of pixels, the black ratio of pixels on the screen was higher, so it started to expose it even more. Because essentially it's just how dark the screen is, the amount of black on screen at one time. It tries to balance that out. But with those little settings, you've got something quite nice. And again, inside your post-processing, you've got quite a few things you can play with. You know, you've got a bit of chromatic aberration. You've got stuff to do with the camera, lens flare, all this kind of a color. Essentially, you got a lot of like film-based stuff where like color grading, like a lot of like you know, you've got like shadows, midtones. So I could even come in here and go right, my shadows. So I could even, it's only really affecting like the really, really deep shadows. And you can kind of see the ear there. You got all this stuff you can play with. And when it comes to rendering, that's the thing that really kicks it up. And you can bring in, you know, experiment with the light stuff. So what have we done there? We've just brought in a big plane from the menu here. Give it a simple emissive texture, which is literally just, where's that? There you are. Like that. Now I brought in this color one as well because here with this value, I mean, literally just literally just a white light. With this one, if I plug this in and then I hit apply, again we turn to black because we're losing that information, but because it's black. But if I start adjusting the color on that, I'm just going to go crazy. I'm just going to go red, like that. And then I hit OK, and I apply that. What's going to happen is that becomes like a red light. Very, very intense. So I can, if I want a warmer sunlight, I wouldn't go for like this color because that'll just make it yellow, as we're going to see now. Makes it really horrible. What I'd do is make something along the like a very desaturated orange color, something like that. And now we're actually giving a bit of colour to a skin because we're adding warmth into the skin. So that's with that pinky kind of orangey desaturated colour there. And if I plug back in that straight up white constant, so even the colour of what you light with is important. And again, this is really subtle. It's more towards the white than anything else, but you know, if I desaturate even more towards white and then apply that, lightens up a little bit more, but we've still got that warmth into the skin. See what I mean? So you can, even with that little light there, you can add quite a lot, which is then why we've got that cool light to the left hand side that's bouncing a bit of cold here, and then we've got the nice warm light behind it. Or even you could put that, you know, you could do whatever you want. You can even, if we just copy this, I'm going to bring a light in to only affect her ears, essentially. I want to pick up on some of those ears. Where are we? There we are. So I have to manhandle it into place first. That's 2 in front of the ear. Yep, it's 2 in front of the ears. There we go, behind the ears. So you can see it's not really affecting much here. It's just adding a little bit of something onto the ear there. So lots of fun stuff you can do. So that's the lighting stuff. And again, you experiment with that. I think for me, one of the main things with this, if you want to go for something a bit more towards softer, it's kind of realistic, is that bounce board, that soft light coming down. Because a lot of the other lights, the shadows are really, really sharp. And the directional light is just a little bit too, I don't know, not great for this kind of situation. Now, if we'll just do that save. Now, if we want to actually give ourselves some daylight, like we want to make it look like it's outside, what we can do is I'm just going to make a folder and stick some of these lights in. So, studio lights. That's all. Do my typing thing there again. Studio lights. There you go. So I'll stick all those lights in there, as well as that plane. Is that my plane? Yep. Stick that in there. Cool. And then I'll hide that. And then what I'm going to do is start bringing in the elements to make an exterior lighting thing. Now, if you remember, we did do the HDRI stuff. That does help. What I've done there with the studio light setup stuff is similar to some of the results you get from HDRIs, but obviously we can control it. But to get a really generic outdoor lighting inside of Unreal, I'm going to do another folder, call it outdoor lighting. This is where we use a directional light. So I'll put in a directional light. There you go. Oh, that's strong, as you can tell. But directional lights aren't good on their own. They need other things to help them work. And those are a skylight. There we go. And then you need an exponential height fog. I don't know, I'm looking at the search bar. Volumetric clouds. And then this is the big one, sky atmosphere. Now they will all be. Oh, you also need you do need a plane underneath for this as well, because it's all about bounce lighting. So I'll make a quick. I'll change the base material to be a grey colour. Like that. There we go. There you go. So it's a bit different. It's really, really sharp. But obviously we've just brought these in, so we've not really had a time to play with it. So let me get skylight, photometric sky, and directional. There you go. So I'll put that in the outdoor lighting section. There you go. And again, we can start messing with stuff. Now, the great thing about what I brought in here is, because I've got stuff like the sky atmosphere, the volumetric clouds, all this kind of stuff, if I was to start rotating the light downwards, we start getting nighttime. And I can start raising this up. And obviously the settings inside of here, you know, the source angle, which will, one of these softens the shadows. I can't remember which one it does. Soft source angle. I think I have to really boost it to get this working. Temperature, obviously, you know, if we want to make it really cold or really warm. So we want to boost the indirect lighting. So if we turn that all the way down, we just get like black shadows. If we start turning that, so it's basically the amount of light which bounces back onto the subject. When I boost that all the way, that's a little bit more realistic. But as you can see, you're still dealing with quite sharp shadows. Now, in this environment, one thing really jumped out to me is the shininess of the skin. So I don't know what you're going to do with that shininess of the skin, but when I looked at the materials for the head, open up please, there you go. So I looked at your pack texture. Everything so far is fine, but your pack texture had two things wrong with it. It's your red going into your ambient occlusion. There was nothing on the ambient occlusion. So we actually have a look at this. So in the red channel, there's nothing. And in the blue channel, there's nothing. The only information's in your green channel, and that's your roughness. Boom, 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 there you go. Yeah, the only colours in your... The only information's in your roughness channel, the green channel. So I'm just going to untick these two for now. So we're going to get... If we just apply that... That's what it look like, okay? As you can see, nothing's changed. Now what I'm going to do here is do a little bit of like behind the scenes photoshopping inside here. I'm going to hold 3. I'm going to make a color node, a color constant there, and I'm going to make this white, straight up white. Now if you remember with roughness, white is the roughest ever. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to create, I'm going to hold L, and I'm going to make a lerp node. Hold L and click, I made a lerp node. And a lerp node is a linear interpolate. Basically moves between 2 points. It's like a blend node, essentially. So if I put the green channel into A, and then the output pin into roughness, and then from this white here, I'm going to put that white RGB pin into B. What I'm setting up here is basically having this be my main image, and this be my thing I'm going to blend into it. So, and the default alpha is set to 0.5. So if I just apply this off screen, you're going to see that the skin roughs out a little bit. You know, we lose that over shininess. Now with the new Unreals, we do actually have values on a lot of these channels, which is great. However, I like doing it the old-fashioned way. I'm going to hold 1 again and click, create a constant node, so I can plug that in there. And this basically is in control of the blend. So with that set to 0 there, if I hit apply and look, she's very, very shiny. Super, super shiny. She's oily. But just off screen, I'm going to set that value to like 0.25 and then hit apply. There you go. So now we're starting to, there's a little bit more like velvet skin. And then, you know, if I go to like 0.15, And you see with a little bit of highlight popping in there, which is nice. Now, there's a really good way of actually seeing this on these nodes, like seeing it firsthand. If I right-click on this lerp node, right-click, I can start previewing node. And what it does is it changes that preview here to what the image actually would be. So if I set this to 0, that's what it's going to look like. If I set this to 1, that's what it's going to look like. This is very cool. And if I change this color to black, same things happens, but basically in reverse. So I can go 0.5. We're getting much darker. If I go to 0.9, we're getting really dark, which would mean this gets really shiny. You know, so that's just like, she's glossy now. It's obviously not what you want. So that's why you want that to be white. Whoop, there we go. So we set that to like 0.0, 0.12. Yeah, that was quite nice actually, that one. So that gives you the control over this. Now there is, I'm going to experiment a little bit with this. There are ways of getting like almost like histogram level stuff in there where you can start to pin the blacks and pin the whites a little bit more. So you want to push stuff. And that is done after this. So we'll just right click that, stop previewing. There we go. Wake up. Yeah, that's done after this. So I'm going to take this information, then I'm going to kind of like crush it a little bit, and I believe that's done by a power node. So I'm going to right click, type in power. I'm going to plug that in there, and again plug that into there. I'm going to preview this. And if I start adjusting the numbers in this little box here, we should, yeah. It's not that one. Okay, I'm gonna. That's not really doing what I thought it was, in all honesty. I'm pulling a blank. There is a way of basically setting up a bunch of nodes, which you can then do like, you can push and pull the whites like a histogram would do, like your levels would do inside Photoshop. But it's a nice basic thing there. That's a nice little setup to do. There you go. Save that. And then what we've got there is two different lighting setups. An indoor and an outdoor. Thing I have a play with. Very nice. Now when it comes to the hair, clicking stuff here, I'm clicking stuff. There we go. When it comes to the hair, I had a look through, and we'll have a look through again. I can't really see much wrong with what you did actually. I think it might come down to what's happening in the texture, because if we look at this, what I'm not seeing is like the normal map information really punching out, but looking at it, it looks to be like there's something going on inside the normal map itself. We've got I'm not sure what's going on with your textures for your hair. Oh, it's because you've created an X in you. That's why. So here, what we need to do is re-render the normal map, but basically tell the camera to ignore the back plane, because the back plane still be invisible. Same for, well, this one's fine because obviously you want that green in the background, but in the normal map one, you've got that here where you don't want that background. That's giving our hair no life. It's taking away all that normal information. The ambient occlusion one you could probably, leave alone. To be honest though, you're probably not using the ambient occlusion one in here anyway. That's your alpha. But you'll sometimes see people use these kind of maps interestingly. That they'll use maps that were made for one thing for another thing. Now, one thing this doesn't give you is an ID map. Doing this XGen stuff, it doesn't give you an ID map, which is basically it gives a value range on all the different strands. This one's kind of doing it. What's this one? This is just download. It's called. It basically uses values. Not every hair strand gets a different value, but there's a random assortment of values applied to your hair. And what that gives you is the ability to kind of start to, again, inside your materials, push and pull these values to then start to, really push out the highlights, really push back the shadows, so it then starts to give hair kind of depth. But the main one, looking at this now, yeah, is the null map. I was talking about it off screen then. Sorry, the null map's got this background on it here, and that's because one. I wouldn't want you to do it now because you'd have to rearrange your UVs, but you've got all this wasted space out here. The camera would have needed to be closer to fill up the square, and then when you're rendering, you'd have to basically ignore the backplane or apply material to the backplane, which is a normal material, which just basically gives you that normal purple blue color anyway. It's because of this backplane here is basically shallowing out all the normal values. You're losing that nice information. That's why the hair kind of looks a bit flat, because there's no normals, essentially. And I'm not sure what size we're at as well. What size are we at? What size are we? Okay, so we're at 4K. Another thing with XGen, it's why I don't really like XGen. You have to mess with the settings for anti-aliasing, because we're getting a lot of aliasing on the hair. So then some of the hair looks a little bit like fractured and broken because it's not. The anti-aliasing needs to be bumped up inside of Arnold. But you've got everything in range then. You're in position there, and obviously you've got the Arnold scene already made. So all you got to do is go in there, find the settings for the anti-aliasing, buff them up, and you'll be good to go. But those are just a few things. I think one of the most important one is the lighting, and then we've got some shader stuff there for just dealing with some of the skin. Yeah, cool. So I think that's everything. I can't think if I've missed anything. But yeah, hopefully that helps.